Okay. So, why don't you start out from your childhood and what you remember?
Like, do you mean from a certain age to a certain age, or?
We'll go from probably about like your first memory, like when you're like 2 or so, up until your graduation from high school.
Oh, golly, my first memory.
Or just like your earliest memory you've had.
My brother is 4 years younger than I am. And I can remember when they brought him home. That was a big change in our life because it was all girls before that. But my sisters were so much older than me that, I mean, they made me walk like a half a block behind them going to school every day because I was their bratty little sister.
Yeah.
So I had to walk with them because that was mom and dad's rules, but I had to walk a half a block behind them so nobody would think I was with them. I do remember that. I think them bringing my brother home was probably a big change for all of us. Because he was the baby, he was the boy, you know, so he could do no wrong, he just shined. And so I suppose part of it was jealousy and not wanting to be usurped as the youngest child anymore. And so all those emotions that go with having a new baby come into your home. So that's the first thing that stuck out in my mind. I'm not sure where you want me to go from there. Kindergarten, I loved kindergarten. We talked about that. We always had little rugs. We made my rug out of old plastic bags. And we'd braid them together, and then I don't remember how mom sewed them or whatever she did so they didn't come apart, but that was a rug that I had for kindergarten. We'd always take a nap. And I remember in kindergarten we had these great big purple colors. There was purple, yellow, red, blue, and green, I think, and they were just huge. They were so big you couldn't hardly hold them in your fingers, so you'd almost have to hold them with your fist wrapped around it. I remember that. I really loved my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Finkrell. And actually, she was my 2 older sisters' kindergarten teacher. Mine, my brother's when he went through. And her and her husband were, when I was married to my first husband, they were our host and hostess for our wedding reception and greeted people as they came. Yeah.
That's cool.
His mom and brother lived across the street from us. So that's kind of how we met there.
That's cool.
Kind of what you see on Facebook, you read about, do you remember this, do you remember that? I remember them all. I can remember, we were always at families growing up on weekends, mostly my dad's side of the family. Until I was about 10, 11, we didn't have a whole lot to do with my mom's side of the family because she was considered an outcast in certain ways. She got pregnant, her and my dad, and she got pregnant, and so she was kind of an outcast. Well, she was an outcast in the family, mainly by my grandma and grandpa. But then what they felt triggered on down to her sisters, and mainly her sisters. So as grandma and grandpa died and we all grew up together, we were never invited to any birthday, anniversary events. We weren't invited for Thanksgiving and Christmas get-togethers with the family because mom had gotten pregnant, which is just really silly. But that, I mean, that's how people thought back then. But my dad's side of the family wasn't like that. They were open and, you know. So we spent most weekends, we'd drive down to one of my 2 aunt and uncles either Uncle Herman and Aunt Sue's, and she was my dad's sister, or Aunt Mamie and Uncle Heine's, and Aunt Mamie was my dad's sister. And, well, I'll come back to the twin thing, but Aunt Mamie was a twin, and Uncle Alvy was her brother, twin brother. Anyway, when we go to Aunt Sue's, she had a music room, as most people did. We didn't, because we couldn't afford to have a piano or anything. We didn't have the room in our home either. But as soon as everybody visited, then we'd all eat, then everybody pitch in and clean up, and we all head into the music room. And there would be the piano or the organ and guitars and smaller drum sets and harmonicas and banjos and you name it. And I haven't quite figured out why the banjo and harmonica were in there, because mostly everything we sang was gospel music. And I'm sure that came from when their parents grew up, and it carried on down. My great grandma and grandpa had a plantation in Virginia, sugar plantation. They had one of the largest plantations, and at one time they owned over 2,500 slaves.
Jeez.
And of course, during the Civil War then, they lost everything. But the plantation is still there.
Really?
And I had planned to go down there a couple of years ago, and the plans changed, and so I didn't get down there. But at some point I want to go down, but I've looked up on the internet and found a lot of the information about it from my parents and stuff. But anyway, so I think the gospel music carried down from them with the black music, and then it carried into the gospel, and so it went on down through the family, and that's what we did. That was our Sunday. We'd have music in the afternoons. Nobody had TVs or anything, so we sat around and sang gospel. And I remember when Jennifer, your Aunt Jennifer, I'd always told the kids about it, but they never got to meet any of that family of my dad's, because they were pretty much all gone by the time I had kids. But I was telling them all the time about getting together and singing gospel. Well, we had a family reunion, James reunion, and went to Tilden, and they had rented a hall, so we all ate, everybody cleaned up, and went to my cousin's house, and out came the instruments, and they had lights set up for when it got dark in the evening. And we played instruments. I don't anymore, but out came the gospel. And Jennifer, she just couldn't believe it. She just was amazed. And then that happened one time when I was married to my second husband, Jim, or am still married to Jim, I guess. We went to another family reunion, and he'd heard all the conversations about getting together and singing gospel, and same thing happened. And he said, "My gosh, you guys really do that, don't you?" And we did.
Yeah.
So every get together was an all afternoon self-entertainment.
That sounds really cool.
And people just don't do that anymore, get together with their families. There's such a sad loss and sad breakdown.
Yeah.
I think that's why we still have issues in the world today with young kids, because they don't have that family bond, family feeling, that if you don't think you can go to your parents with something that's wrong, you always knew you had this outer band of aunt and uncles that would just do anything for the kids. So you guys don't have that really.
Yeah.
And so that was a big thing in my life. Interesting tidbits other than that. Well, my dad was chief of police, and for many years, and when he retired from that, he became a railroader for the CB&Q Railroad at that time. It no longer is that. He was also went to Omaha, went through the FBI school became a Secret Service, so he went throughout the state whenever there was a politician or any time the FBI was needed to work as security. He always was called in for that. His biggest moments that I remember talking about, and the pictures have disappeared, none of us know what happened to those pictures. And we would all just love to have them.
Mm-hmm.
He was called in to work security guard as Secret Service security when John F. Kennedy was running for president of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, Norfolk which was near my hometown, 12 miles from where I grew up, Battle Creek. But Norfolk was a big farming community, and it was considered on the level of Omaha, Lincoln, then Norfolk.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not near that today, but back in those days, that's how it was considered to be. So
Yeah.
that's how he became to come in. He came in on the railroad. They had a railroad car, and he traveled around on that through the Midwest. And Dad got to do Secret Service with him.
That's
while
cool.
he was, Dad was really proud of that. And then when his brother Bobby Kennedy was running for president, he came to Norfolk, but he flew in, and so Dad was also in the Secret Service guarding and protecting
Mm-hmm.
Bobby Kennedy. He did not like Bobby Kennedy, but he really liked John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
And he voted for him. I
Mhm.
never knew how my parents voted until then, and they were proud of having voted for
Yeah.
President Kennedy. I think they were mainly Republican before that,
Mm-hmm.
but he kind of changed their minds.
Yeah.
And then my mom, she was a stay-at-home mom until, oh golly, I had to learn how to clean house and bake and cook right along with her. That's just what
Mhm.
girls did. And then when I was old enough to prepare a whole meal supper and that kind of stuff and be entrusted to watching my brother, then she went to work so that when she come home, supper was prepared and she didn't have to do that. And then we could sit down and eat, and then her and I always cleaned up dishes. But we had chores. We didn't get paid for chores. If there was something that we wanted on a Saturday when we went to town,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we'd maybe get a nickel or whatever. But we weren't ever given 25 cents or $1 or $5 for doing weekly chores. Everybody chipped in and did weekly chores.
Yes.
And it was done. And there was no arguing. You never had to be told. You knew what day you had to do what, and that's how it was. But along with my brother, we used to go around and collect pop bottles and stuff, and we'd cash them in and go to town on Thursday night. Mom would get groceries, or we'd go to Norfolk on Saturdays, and that'd be haircut day or whatever. And then we could go into like a 5 and dime Hested store. Some were called Hesteds, some called it 5 and 10 store, it didn't matter. But when you walked in the door, they had like a U-shaped glass enclosures. And some had candy, some had cookies, some had hot nuts, and you could buy whatever you wanted out of there, and they'd open it up in the back and scoop you up a little bag. And so if we had a couple pennies, we'd go in and we'd buy either strawberry or chocolate wafer cookies, which got you about 5 or 6 cookies in a bag. Or sometimes I would get chocolate stars, or Periels. I don't know if you know what Periels are. They're a little round flat chocolate disc with just coated with little white beads.
Oh.
I'd get those.
Yeah.
And they were lightweight enough that when they weighed them, if you had like say a nickel, your bag would be about half full. And I would get malt balls. I loved malt balls, chocolate malt balls.
Mhm.
And let's see, we'd always go to the barber shop with Dad, and it was fascinating to sit. If there was an empty chair, we could sit in it and twirl in it. And it was fun to sit there and just watch the barber shop spinning thing that was outside.
Yeah.
The red,
Yeah.
blue, and white
Mhm.
stripe. And, that was just fun to sit there and watch that.
Mhm.
If they had enough change left over from whatever shopping they had to do that Saturday, we might drive over to the Zesto and we'd get a little malt. My brother and I would share a small malt, and then Mom and Dad would share theirs. So I don't remember, I suppose maybe there was 10, 15 cents, maybe a quarter. I just don't remember how much it was. You just didn't ask for things. If you couldn't figure out a way to earn your own money to purchase it, you just didn't get it because money was really tight. You know, that was 10 years after 5 to 10 years after the Depression, and so money was not spent freely. Family vacations, we just didn't do those. We took one family vacation when I was little, and we went to the Black Hills. And the only reason we went there was Mom and Dad's friends had moved to the Black Hills, and they'd invited us to come up. So we drove up for a weekend. That was a long drive.
Yeah.
Because our car was an old car, and they just didn't have the speed on vehicles like they do now. But anyway, in the front seat was Mom and Bob and Dad. Of course, Dad drove. Then in the back seat was Sherry, Bev, and I. Well, they were the older ones, so they got the back seat to curl up and sleep on. I slept on the floorboard of the car, the back seat. Oh, it was cold and it was hard. I remember that. Oh, awful. And we had sandwiches when we traveled, so if we got hungry, we ate a sandwich and an apple or something out of our bag. There was never any stopping and eating at a restaurant, ever. That cost too much money. First time I can remember eating at a restaurant, actually sitting down and ordering, was when we went to I had two aunt and uncles. Mom's sister and her husband, they owned a restaurant in Tilden at one time. And Uncle Alvy and Aunt Dad's brother, that was a twin, Aunt Mamie, they owned a restaurant in Norfolk. And it was called Top of the Hill because it was on the top of the hill. And they owned that restaurant. Well, we never went into either restaurant to eat, but I can remember we went because if they needed help with something like painting or a lot of cleaning, you know, Dad would do it and make the extra money. Or if we went and did some shopping for them, you know, or we just go and visit with them in their restaurant. And they would always offer you food, but we were never allowed to take it unless it was like a little dish of ice cream or an ice cream cone. Once in a blue moon, Dad would allow him to give us a few French fries. You know, if they had some leftovers, just we'd eat them because they were French fries. They were good, cold or not, we didn't care. But we were never allowed to eat. So the one time we went to Tilden, and I don't know, Mom and Dad must have had some extra money left over, but we went in and Mom was with us, now that I think about it, and that was unusual. Anyway, we were told we could order a meal. So all of us, we all ordered a hamburger. My brother and I shared fries, and we shared a malt. And that was the best hamburger, fries, and malt I've ever tasted in my life. I know it sounds strange. Here we own a restaurant, but it was just, we didn't have to cook it, and it was like we were kings and queens sitting in a restaurant ordering food. Wow. So that made an impression on me.
So you went to high school in Battle Creek?
Yes, went to high school in Battle Creek. Am I rattling on too much about my younger days?
I'm a little, but you're fine. So what year did you graduate?
I graduated in 1968. And I can remember I wanted to go to art school when I graduated. So bad I wanted to go to art school. Because I really could draw very well. And I was always drawing, finding scrap papers, and I was always drawing and stuff. Didn't have any paints, but I would draw with charcoal or coal, not coal. I can't think of it. It's the loose powder. Anyway, I kept hounding them beginning of my senior year. I wanted to go to school. Well, they didn't have the money. So I couldn't go, and I just had to graduate and get a job. In those days it was expected. If girls just didn't go to college. Boys did. Girls were expected to find a partner and get married and raise a family. That's just the time. Well, unbeknownst to them, I sent in some drawings to one of those clippings out of a magazine where draw this picture and go to school here. And I got a letter, and they were gonna come and visit.
Oh.
I was so panicked because I hadn't told Mom and Dad that I'd done that. I didn't know they were even gonna come talk to me. And I thought, I gotta tell them. So after supper that night, I told them what I'd done, and they were so upset with me. And I begged them, can we just listen to them when they come? Just listen to them. So they agreed to go that far. But I knew.
Yeah.
And so they came one night. There was 2 of them. And they showed them what I had sent in, and I don't remember what they all said about it or anything. And then they asked to see some of my other artwork, and so I told them, or went and got it, showed it to them, and then they talked to Mom and Dad about, what it would cost and everything, and Mom asked me to leave the room, that they were gonna talk to them separately. So I snuck up the steps. They were in the dining room, and I snuck up the steps from the kitchen. And we didn't have heat upstairs in our house. And there was a gas stove that was in the dining room, and that's what heated the first floor. But it didn't do much to heat the upstairs where the bedrooms were. But in their bedroom on the floor, they had like an iron grate, and you could hear what was being said downstairs. And I could hear them talking, and Mom said there was just absolutely no way were they going to allow it, that they were gonna have to leave, and that was just, no more talking about it. That was the end of the subject. And so I heard them leave, and she called me down, and they said, nope. And you didn't argue about it. That was it. So I didn't get to go to school, and so I worked though. I babysat families from the time I was 10 years old all the way through the end of high school. Babysat every summer. And when I was about 11, there was a little ice cream shop uptown, and I got a job there once a week, sweeping and scrubbing and taking out garbage and washing, what few windows there were and that kind of stuff, filling napkins. And so I made money that way. And then the city library was built. I think I was probably 7. And I had never been in it to get a book. That was just something we didn't do. And I was probably going to be 11. And I went in and Mrs. Moore was a librarian. And I told her I needed a job, that I had to save money to, if I wanted new clothes, or, which we didn't have much of, or shoes, or wanted to go to a movie or something, I had to have my own money or I couldn't do any of that stuff. And she took a chance and let me clean. I even was, after several months, I was given a key to the library.
Really?
But I was hired twice a week. I cleaned that library, and to me it seemed like a White House. It seemed so big.
Yeah.
But now to see it, it's not even a library anymore. I think they turned it into like a emergency care type place.
Yeah.
And it's not quite as big as what I thought at the time I was cleaning it. But
yeah.
Every Wednesday night after school, and I had my own key because, I'd get there from walking from school to the library. I got there by, 3:45. And I cleaned till the library closed at 5.
Mm-hmm.
And it was usually 8:30 at night before I got out of there, so I had to have a key to lock up when I left.
Mm-hmm.
And then on Saturdays, the library closed at 1 o'clock, and at 1 o'clock I went in and I did windows, I dusted all the books and the shelves, and I swept and I scrubbed and waxed the floor. Of course, then it was all done by hand.
Yeah.
Waxed the floor, I had to sweep the sidewalk, take out the garbage, right? There was a lot to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I did that until the week before I graduated.
Really?
Yep, I did. So all that money I earned from there,
Mm-hmm.
it paid for the things I wanted. Like if I wanted to go out with my friends after a game or something to the little cafe where everybody went. If I wanted a burger or a malt or something, I had to pay for my own.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't ask for money. And I talk about new clothes. I maybe bought an outfit once or twice.
Yeah.
But I bought my own winter coats and stuff like that. And I bought my own prom dresses,
Mm-hmm.
and I paid for my own graduation pictures, and I paid for my own graduation invitations, and I had enough money saved up for my first 2 months of rent and to turn all my utilities on, and I rented an apartment in Norfolk.
Mm-hmm.
So it was ready to go the day after graduation. I had packed up my suitcases that I got for graduation, and I moved out and moved to my own apartment.
Did you live with anyone?
Nope, just me, myself, and I. Eventually I did, but
Yeah.
it was just me the first couple months. And I didn't have a car.
Yeah.
I never had my own car. And so I had to walk anywhere that I wanted to go.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Norfolk's probably as big as Fremont. So I mean, it was pretty good size.
Yeah.
And I worked, when my first job was, I was a dental assistant. And I worked for him for probably, 4 or 5, maybe 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
It just was not for me. He mostly did dentures, so it was basically always pulling teeth, and I just couldn't.
Yeah.
So from there, I left and got a job at Shepherd's Bakery.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it. And he's the one that taught me how to decorate cakes, and I just absolutely loved it. And I worked 6 days a week there.
Yeah.
And then it just got kind of, well, I met your grandpa, Troy.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to Norfolk Community College. And I did get a girlfriend to move in just to help. The money was tight, I just didn't have money to do extras.
Mm-hmm.
And in the winter time when I was walking to my jobs, because the dental building was clear up on the top of the hill, and it was probably 2 miles.
Whoa.
And I had to walk that every morning, and then after work, walk
Mhm.
home. And then to walk to downtown, it was probably a mile to the bakery when I worked there. So
Yeah.
the wintertime, it was butt cold. And it was a lot of walking.
Yeah. You can take that if you need to.
Hello? Pretty good. I have company right now for about another 45 minutes to an hour. Can I call you back? Okay, I'll call you back. All right, goodbye. It was just really slick,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and so it's hard going up and down those hills. Are you kidding me? Nobody ever calls. Hello? Good, talking to Lucas. Yeah, he's got a school project that I'm working with him on, so. And I remember I got my note out for Harmony, so I'll pick her up at 7:20, or 9:20. No, 9:20. Okay, so I'll remember. All right, goodbye. Love you, bye. I take Harmony to school tomorrow. First Wednesday of every month.
Yeah.
They have to be there early for prayer group, or they come in later and the day is spent in prayer group.
Oh, that's
anyway,
cool.
So I got to where when it was really bad, you know, our winters were a lot harder than what they are now. And sometimes it was 10 below and it'd be snowing and blowing.
Jeez.
Like, oh my God, I gotta walk all that ways. So I would call a taxi once in a while and treat myself because I didn't have a car. Oh, that was nice. But anyway, then I met your dad or your grandpa there, and we got married in 1968, December of 1968.
Yeah.
So, and you know the history from that, or do you want me to keep going from there?
Yeah, keep going until now, basically.
Okay, but keep it shorter.
I mean, you can keep doing, like, what you're doing is fine, just keep going.
Well, I probably drug on too much in the beginning. I wasn't quite sure what you were really after.
That's fine.
And you asked me where my interest became. When Mom and Dad could afford it, on Sundays our family time was, in the summertime, we'd go to the car races. And that's where I got interested in car racing.
Yeah.
And my older sister, she drove stock once in a while. And her first husband drove race cars there too. And long after they were divorced. Now see, I think my mom was already dead. And Jim and I went up and took my dad to a car race. And Herb, that was my sister's first husband, rode his stock car, and the stock doesn't look anything like what they do now. The stock cars of that day looked more like a Legends race car. If you ever watch a Legends race, they looked more like that. But anyway, when he flew off of the racetrack, he hit a telephone pole and broke his neck, and he was he was in a nursing home until he died. And he couldn't walk, and he was, of course, not married to my sister anymore at that time. So anyway, that's how I got started in liking car racing. Your grandpa and I, after we got married, we had an apartment there, and I continued to work at the bakery, and he was working at, can't remember the name of the factory. It was a medicinal type factory where they made syringes and medical supplies. They made medical supplies there.
Yeah.
And just wasn't a whole lot of money at that time. And somebody told him to go to work for Burlington Northern and to go to Fremont and get interviewed. So he did, and he was there. Well, he spent one night, and then he came back the next day, but he got hired on. So we got rid of our apartment, and left my job, and we moved to Fremont, had a little cracker box house, I mean, I can't even describe how little the rooms were. The bedroom, we had a single size bed that we both slept in, and one dresser, and a little rack that we put up on the wall because there was no closet in the whole house. And that's where we had to hang our clothes. That's all the bedroom would hold, is a single bed. You couldn't put a double bed on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it had, we thought we were really living high in the hog. Our living room, we took Mom and Dad's TV. They had got a new color TV.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't have TV in the house until I was 9 years old growing up.
Yeah.
Nor did we have electricity or running water till I was 9 years old. We had an outhouse, and we used like that lamp that's sitting on top of that china hutch over there.
Mm.
We'd fill that with oil, and we'd burn that, carry it around the house at night. Anyway, we had their old TV. We had 2 lawn chairs.
Yeah.
And I had taken blankets and threw the lawn chairs, or blankets over the lawn chair.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to some cheap little store, I don't remember the name of it anymore, bought one little round table that was supposed to be a footstool, but that was our coffee table.
Mm-hmm.
That was all we had in the living room. Oh, no, we put the lamp on that table, that's right, we had a lamp.
Mm.
And then in the kitchen, there was a table and chairs that was in the house that we were in. And then a little tiny bathroom. I mean, it was just tiny, tiny, tiny. And I think it cost $75 a month, if I'm not mistaken. And we were asked to vacate the house. They were nice people, and when we rented it, we asked about the yard. We don't have a mower, but we can hire a kid. Is it up to us to keep the lawn up or not?
Mm-hmm.
Otis, get down! And they said, no, they take care of the yard. Well, he was working for Burlington. First 3 months, you didn't get a paycheck, so I was out walking along the highways. At that time, you could still turn in pop bottles. And I collected pop bottles, and we lived on hot dogs and mashed potatoes. But that's what that could buy.
Yeah.
And anyway, the second month I told Troy, I said, this yard, it needs to be mowed. And he says, I know. Well, we went out to their house, and nobody was home. And I guess we didn't pursue it, so that's kind of our fault too. But then a couple weeks later, he stopped by the house one night and he says, you guys have got 30 days to get out. And we said, why? We're paid on rent. And he says, because you're not keeping the yard up. And we said, we actually, we first moved in, you said no at that time, but nothing ever got done, so we thought we misunderstood. We drove out to see, what the scoop was. You weren't home, and I apologized for not coming back. And he says, that was your job all along. Okay, wow, that's how quick that happens. And luckily, I walked around to see if because Troy had the car, to see where I could find places that would have something for rent. We didn't need nothing big. It was just us two. And 2 blocks over from that house, there was a really cute little house for rent. And so I walked around it till I could find out who owned that house. Well, the people that lived behind it owned it, and he was chief of police in Fremont. Oh, they were such nice people. They even came out to Alliance when we lived out there and spent a weekend with us. They were just super nice people. Nice people. Anyway, so we rented that house, and it was $100 a month. And there was 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that's not even as big as our bathroom here. Oh, it was a little kitchen. And 2 bedroom, living room, kitchen, and then it had a garage. And it had a basement, and that's where we stored extra stuff. And so the one bedroom, we put a double bed in it, and then I got pregnant with Wendy, so we put her crib and dresser and everything in that little room too. So that's where we lived there, and Burlington transferred him to Omaha, so he had to go to work every day in Omaha.
Jeez.
So Wendy and I did a lot of walking around and made friends. To this day, we're still friends with Steam Blocks that live behind. They still live in Fremont, and he owns Steam Block Steel Erection Company. They build big metal buildings and stuff. And they're godparents to Wendy, your Aunt Wendy. And we've gotten together maybe 3 times in all the years since, but I mean, we visit on the phone once in a while. So from there, then he got a job came open in Alliance, a lot more money, and he would become a dispatcher out there instead of, I forget what his title was in his other job. Anyway, he wanted to become a dispatcher because he made more money. So we took the job in Alliance, and we couldn't afford to have a truck to rent us out or drive everything out. And we didn't have enough people that had trucks that could help us move anything out. So Burlington offered one of their rail cars on the train.
Really?
Yeah. And they said, put your stuff on there and we'll haul it out to Alliance, because they went back out there to go out to coal country in Wyoming, Montana, and they go right through Alliance all the time. So we got it. Oh, I would never do that again in my entire life. Dirty, oh my God. We cleaned it out, but we weren't thinking.
Yeah.
You know, it's not sealed off. So any dirt or anything, rain, whatever, came right through it. Oh my God, his stuff was a mess. But it got to Alliance, and once we moved out to Alliance, the first house was on 10th and Box Butte, which was a corner of the main street and one of the main thoroughfare streets. And we lived up it was on a hill, and we lived right up there, right across the street from Lutheran Church, so we walked over to church every Sunday. And 2 blocks from the hospital and doctor's offices, so that was handy. And to walk downtown was probably, from like your house to walk down to the grocery store would be about the distance from the first business to the house. That would be about how far it is. Because once we moved out there, then Troy went to work still in Burlington, but went up to Shadron. They needed a dispatcher in Shadron. Well, we had 1 car. So the 2 years we lived up there, I didn't have a car, and he didn't come home every night because it cost too much money for gas and stuff. So he'd only come home on weekends or every other weekend. So anywhere I wanted to go, we walked. Luckily, the park was about 2 blocks down the hill from us, and I met a lady down there. Her husband worked for Burlington, and we're still friends today. We haven't talked on the phone now for about a year, but it reminds me I gotta call her. So anyway, and then I'd have to walk downtown that's where the banks were, because I'd have to go pick up his check and get it in the bank. And then the grocery store was about, getting pretty close to 2 miles, well, 1.5 miles out. But I'll bet it was 2 miles. And that's where we had only grocery store in town, and that's where you had to go get groceries. So put Wendy in the stroller, and when I had Jennifer, they both had to sit in that little tiny stroller. Oh my God. And I knew how many bags I could hang onto the handles and then still be able to push without banging their heads into the bags and stuff. Oh, that was a long time, and I did it in the rain, snow, whatever. If I wanted food, that's where I had to go. And so there was just a lot of family issues happening because we were apart
Yeah.
and well, and some other issues, so it was just time we had to move home.
Mhm.
And so we had to wait for an opening, and so we moved to another house and bought it, so we had to sell that house. And we hired a U-Haul, or a big moving truck to move our stuff back. It didn't go on no train.
Yeah.
And we came back here to Waverly, and he worked in Lincoln as a dispatcher. We bought a house over on the north side of Waverly here, and JJ was born. Well, she was born after we moved here, yeah. We moved here in the early summer, and she was born in November. We moved here in the wintertime. She was born in June.
Mhm.
Stop and think. And I went to work after she was born at 4-Star Drug, the old 4-Star Drug that was just a skinny, long drugstore.
Yeah.
And just had 2 aisles, so when you come in on, then one other, and that went back to the pharmacy. And so I worked there, and then they bought the store next to it, and I became their clothing buyer and their makeup buyer.
Mhm.
And worked there for many, many years. Worked at Co-op, and then I got a job opportunity to work in our dance.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I decided to go to art school.
Yeah, really?
So it was all done, well, now they do it online,
Yeah.
but it was all done by mail. And I mean, it was regular semesters and classes and everything you had to pass,
Mhm.
tests you had to take. And I started working at our dance and became a gemologist in diamonds and other stones, and did a lot of design work. And the first year I worked there, well, I shouldn't say that. I started in early fall, and that first Christmas, I was #1 jewelry salesperson in the United
Really?
States.
Really?
They had our dance all over California and New York. I mean, they were all over. It was like a chain. Our dance wasn't just jewelry. It was kind of like, I guess never had clothes, but you could go in and buy TVs
Oh, jeez.
and maybe kind of like a Toys R Us.
Mhm.
Because they had books and they had kitchen utensils. You could buy lamps and all kinds of knickknacks. I mean, it was just an all-around store. Never had food, never had clothes.
Mhm.
But anyway, in the jewelry department, I was #1 seller
I did
out
not
of the
know
United
that.
States for jewelry. Yeah, I was pretty proud of that.
That's awesome.
And then there became some, between your grandpa and I the issues that started an alliance, just, we never crossed over that hurdle. It
Mhm.
was both of us. It takes 2 to get married, and it takes 2 to
Yeah.
become unmarried. Well, I guess before we separated, that's when we were approached, wanted to know if we wanted to buy a video store.
Really?
And so we talked it over, and we said, yeah, we would. So that's when you could go and rent videos, and they were in the big fat cases.
Yeah.
And where Casey's is
Uh-huh.
where the building used to be.
Really?
Yeah. That's why I quit selling videos, because I retained that in the divorce.
Mhm.
Was because the owners of the building sold the building to Casey's, or the land to Casey's. They came in and tore it down and built Casey's.
Huh.
But the front door is about almost in the same exact spot.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome.
So I'll have to look and see if I can find some of those pictures sometime.
Mhm.
Anyway, So we had that and worked it until we divorced.
Mhm.
So, and from there, you want me to continue on?
Yeah.
Okay. From there, I just sold all the equipment and everything, and I started my own cleaning business. And
Yeah.
I went to work for a friend of ours, Harlan Blythe, and I became a subcontractor. And so I cleaned the dental office, which is no longer there, across the street from the bank that was downtown. In that building used to be a huge dental office.
Mhm.
So I cleaned it. I cleaned the post office. I cleaned the bank across the street from the grocery store. I used to clean the bank. And half of that building used to be a granary where they owned turkeys and they sold grain, and that was their offices. So I cleaned the granary, I cleaned the bank, I cleaned the bank out in Prairie Home, and then Brownie Manufacturing, that all those buildings that used to be along there, it's all torn down now because they built whatever that is over there, irrigation system building over there. But I used to clean Brownies, and then I cleaned the Methodist church. And then private homes, I cleaned private homes. So that's how I made my money, and we lived in the little house that was down here by Co-op, and they tore that house down a couple of years ago. It's just empty land there.
Yeah.
There's a veterinarian store, south across the street is that gray house. Then it used to be the house I rented. Oh, that was the neatest house, yeah. I really liked that.
Yeah.
And in 1979, we got our fire department used to be the ones that took care of all rescue calls too. There was no ambulance, but they would go respond to wrecks or whatever with a fire truck. And the city got a letter stating that Greenwood, they would always call them if they needed an ambulance. Well, they were having a hard time getting enough people to work in Greenwood. So they had sent the city a letter stating that of such date, they no longer would be our ambulance service here. That we would have to make other arrangements. So Mike Danley got a hold of the letter, and he approached me, and him and I started the rescue squad that's here today.
You started it? I thought you were just a part of it. I knew that you started
Well,
it.
I was part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Actually, it was probably about 1978 that we started the actual work, because we didn't go into service until 1979. And it took us a good year and a half to get enough people. We walked door to door, knocked on doors everywhere across this town, put letters in the mail, sent out flyers, we drew up flyers, and asking people to join, take classes with us, that we needed an ambulance and blah, 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 blah. And we started out with, I think, 53 people. Is how many that we got to take class. And so then we worked with the state of Nebraska and got classes set up, and we took them in the basement of the bank across town. And our teacher, Ed, can't think of his last name, he came from Wymore, Nebraska, and it didn't matter if it was solid sleet blowing on the streets, he drove it. You had to be at that class.
Yeah.
I mean, you respected him because he would drive through bad weather just to come teach us. And it took a year for us to go through classes. We went twice a week. And then Mike and I got 5 other people, And when we got those 50 gathered, we had a meeting, we had to vote in officers, because we had to make our own bylaws, our own set of rules, and I mean, there was just a lot the state required. And Mike was named, he was voted in as president, and I was voted in as secretary. I don't think at that time we had a vice president. And Carol Flowers was named treasurer. And then, at that time, we did not elect a captain yet, training captain, because none of us had any training. So we started our classes. Like I said, it took a little over a year, 2 nights a week we went to class. Best time of my life. I loved it. I loved it.
Really?
Absolutely loved it. And it put a lot of stress on the family. That was when I was still married to your grandpa. And it did put a lot of stress on our family. And then trying to run the business too. And, so like I said, there was double-sided reasons.
Yeah. So when did you meet Grandpa Jim then, and like that story?
Well, he joined the rescue squad in 83, I believe, 1983. And I was still married to your grandpa. We were just co-workers. I mean, there was nothing there. We were just co-workers. And he didn't ask me for a date until after I was divorced, so. But that's how your grandpa became, or Grandpa Jim became a member of the rescue squad. So.
That's cool.
And so we had so many people, we had teams on the squad.
Really?
And I made a calendar up. We'd have a day team and a night team for every day. And you signed up what you could work, what you couldn't work. And then I made teams, and there was 5 to a team. And so when there was calls and your pager went off, only those that were on call had to respond. But it's so funny. Over half of all members would respond if there was a call.
Really? And
just sit at the fire station and wait until the call was over. And they'd help you clean the ambulance up and restock and everything. Or if it was a bad call, which we certainly had our share of, they'd be there to have coffee ready and just to let you cry on their shoulders. And if we were out and they knew there was a death that we might have a hard time with, they would call our medical director in Omaha, or in Lincoln. Dr. Reckaway was our medical director, and he was head doc of emergency room at St. E's. And he would call a couple of the other docs, and you'd get back, and well, sometimes they would even call, do you want a code, I don't remember what it was, just say code 13. And we'd say, and that meant, are you gonna need some help after you get back? Meaning, if anybody heard it, we weren't talking about cleaning, we were talking about, we need somebody to talk to. And those docs would come out, and we'd sit at the fire stations on some of those calls for a long time to make sure everybody was okay. And I mean, we had suicides. Those were hard to deal with when you knew them. Knew their families. And somebody killed in a car accident that everybody knew, or like when we had those burn victims on the interstate. Oh my God, this is weird. I was just thinking of them this morning.
Really?
They were talking about California, and every time I hear California, I think of Stockton, because that's where the family was from. And I think about Desiree, and I can remember her name. I'll remember it till the day I die. She was a little girl that was burnt 100% of her body. Everywhere. And she survived.
Really?
She survived. And we stayed in touch with them. In fact, they came back when Grandma was able to get out of her wheelchair and take a step. They flew to Lincoln, met at our restaurant. Our TV and everything was there. And she took her first public steps. And they filmed it on TV and had it on TV. Channel 10 did, yeah. Of her getting out of her wheelchair and walk. Her legs and arms and hands hurt her. And Grandpa, it was his hands and his feet that were burnt so bad. And the little boy, he didn't have one hair singed on him. Not one. But Desiree, and I can't remember the little boy's name, Jim took care of him. Haven't talked about this for a long time. They were in a motorhome, and it's one that you can drive. And they'd stopped at Greenwood. She thought she was having a flat tire. And she did. She had a flat tire. And the guy in the shop in Greenwood put her tire back on, but he didn't have all the lug nuts on. Tied it. And so they were coming down the interstate, and the tire came off. And of course she was going 70 miles an hour at that time, and rolled off the interstate, rolled down the highway or interstate, and then rolled off down the middle ditch. And Grandpa got Grandma out and the two kids out and himself, but his daughter that was driving, the mother of the two kids, she was hanging upside down.
Jeez.
And she couldn't get her seatbelt off, hanging upside down. Her weight, she couldn't get it open. And his hands got burnt. Only his feet were burnt up to that point. The dad's, or Grandpa's. But he put his hands in the window, and they just burnt because he was trying to get the buckle, and he couldn't get it, and he had to get away because, you know, I mean, it's natural. It hurts, painful. And he just kept telling her, he told us this over and over and over. I kept telling her, just close your eyes, it'll be over in a minute, because he said she was going to burn to death. So he just talked to her until she died. Anyway, that was one that was tough.
Yeah.
And I thought of him this morning. I'm sure my Grandma and Grandpa are gone. You know, that's been, well, they were our age then. In fact, I think he was probably 70. That's been 25. Oh, it's been longer now. Probably 30 years ago. So yeah. I'm sure Grandma and Grandpa are dead. I often wonder what happened to Desiree and the boy. But we'll never know, I guess. So anyway, so we had really good people backing us in the squad. And we had a lot of calls like that. Some bad ones. So after the squad, that's when I was divorced, and I met Jim. We did a lot of fishing when we first met. He bought a boat. We did a lot of fishing. And then I started working at the restaurant, because I could always use extra money, you know, I was a single parent.
So he had the restaurant before you
Yeah,
guys?
yeah, he built the restaurant and opened it in 73, I
Oh.
think.
So he's doing the restaurant and the rescue squad at the same time?
Yeah.
That's cool.
And then we started dating, and then we became a couple. So I let my rental go, and
Mm-hmm.
at that time, Wendy was getting married. Well, she was engaged or dating Wade,
Mm-hmm.
and Jennifer was gonna. Her and JJ moved with us up at the restaurant
Yeah.
in the apartment up there,
Mhm.
and they proceeded to. Jenny went to college, and
Mm-hmm.
JJ graduated and went to the Marines, and then didn't make it.
Yeah, I heard about that.
That's too bad. She would have made a good Marine, but she was
Mm-hmm.
really anxious to go.
Yeah.
They were good people, good people.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, and then you guys came along after everybody was married, and
Yeah.
I think you two were the last ones that was ever raised in the restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Braxton really wasn't around a whole lot. We never really got to take care of him a lot because Wendy was home with him.
Yeah.
But Chaz grew up at the restaurant. She was our Cabbage Patch baby. Her baby bed, when she was born, was a cabbage cabbage box that we cut the top off of, and we made a mattress, and that was her crib. We did buy a crib then when you guys were born. It was just a little tiny crib.
Yeah.
And we could put one head at this end and one head at this end. But you guys were there until, oh golly, you were in walkers, because one of you, I don't remember which one, dumped over the salt bucket that we have down below. Chaz always went for the sugar bucket. And Jackson and Harmony, they were never, didn't have that connection, but we had a good time with all you kids there.
Mm-hmm.
And now with health issues, I'm retired, and Grandpa's still working.
So what would you say is like the greatest point in your life? Like
greatest point?
Like your best time in your life overall.
Not event, best time.
Or just like anything, like the best point of your life, like thing that made you most happy or that you were.
I have to say, then, because I was doing it before you guys were born, was when we started the rescue squad. I was very proud of the squad. In fact, when we had our 25th banquet, Jim and I quit. We were there for 25 years. And those were some of the best 25 years. I mean, we had some hard calls, I'll tell you what, but we had some feel-good calls. We had some hilarious calls. Like Mike Danley, the one that him and I started the squad. At our banquet, the Governor Heineman, came to our banquet and presented us with honorary papers.
Really?
To be honorary governors of the state of Nebraska.
Really?
Mine's at the office somewhere. I keep asking Jim to find it. It's in his office. He was always going to frame it. But anyway, one of the funniest calls I'll never, ever forget is Mike and I, and Diane Snyder, and Judy Burcham, and some other, can't remember who the other guy was a car that had a car accident on the interstate. So we get out there, and there's a car that's down the ditch. Doesn't look like it's been damaged whatsoever, but there's a really damaged Volkswagen, little Beetle Volkswagen, on the road. There's just a gazillion Japanese, Chinese, I don't know what they were. I think they were Chinese. Running around on the interstate in this group and just Mike and I looked at each other like, how do we communicate with these people? I mean, you can visually see
Yeah.
they're okay,
Yeah.
but because you were there, you had to, by law, check each and every one.
Mm-hmm.
So we gathered them like little chicks into this group. I said, Mike, see if you can communicate with them. So he starts sounding like he's talking Chinese. And they turn to Mike and just, and they're just, and he's back and they're back and he's back. I'm laughing so hard. It doesn't sound funny. I guess you had to be there to see the whole thing.
Yeah.
But he'd walk away and they're just a line of these guys. And Mike would turn and say something to him. I can't, that's it. The firemen were cracking up. The sheriffs were cracking up. Oh my God. That was so funny. But anyway, that is probably number one.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have to say, grandbabies.
Yeah.
Having your first grandchild.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of them out later.
Yeah.
I appreciate Graceland as much as I did Chaz.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to explain it to you. Someday when you become a grandpa, you remember this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a total different feeling, Lucas, than when you have your kids, you love them. Everybody loves their kids.
Mm-hmm.
But when your grandkid comes, it is a total different feeling that just all in all consumes you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just different. Yeah, so those would be my two things.
Well, I think that's good enough. Thank you.